Alright, so as mentioned, let's now get to the Blarg experiment facility planet. I forgot the specific name. And as I mentioned, this is the planet that they not changed the most but expanded upon, because you still do the same thing you did in the original, but you also have new stuff added to it, you'll see. For starters, you're supposed here to get the jetpack mod that was introduced into the Nexus. Yes, we actually brought it back here and expanded upon. While in the original, if you recall, you were here instead to get a trinket that it was story related. It allowed you to control a ship, for free flight. But obviously, since you don't need it in this, they just, cover it with something else. So I get it. Again, let's be fair. The original game, because it had a lot of early installment weirdness. It had a couple of gadgets that did not stuck around and were probably forgotten. So sidelining those away and streamlining the process, I can understand that.
Oh yeah, no, like changes like this, especially for what's supposed to be a remake, but okay, remake or reimagining, changes like that to the first installment, I do get. Like, if there's one thing that's definitely common with a lot of video game franchises, typically the very first installment, while iconic, can tend to be arguably the most wonky since that's when they were trying to figure something out here and there. Like, let me put it like this, to put things into perspective, if Sonic 1 were remade, I bet you Marble and Labyrinth Zone would see some major touch-ups to better emphasize speed over platforming
Unless
like
Yuji
Mario,
Naka was at the
essentially.
helm.
Wait, really?
I thought he was
okay,
alright.
okay. Okay.
I thought
Okay,
that his
okay.
shtick was the whole, like keep just the one button going, so it would be kind of like Keiji Inafune, a bit of a
Nah,
traditionalist.
I honestly thought his stick was, but these human beings don't look like hedgehogs or echidnas or foxes.
I see we have visitors. If it isn't the lady from Galactic Rangers. I hope you
But yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, for all his one button stuff, I think Yuji Naka would get the assignment with trying to at least make Marble and Labyrinth Zone better, better oriented for speed over platforming, essentially, since, as far as I know, that wouldn't require him to have to do more than his precious one button philosophy. Like, Jesus Christ, it's insane how Balan Wonderworld more or less exposed almost okay, not almost every, but a whole ton of design flaws with Sonic up until Yuji Naka left, essentially. Shame, apparently some of them clung around for Sonic Unleashed, but hey, we seem to have at least cured of that, for the most part.
Well, like I
Especially by
said, considering
Frontiers.
considering how Keiji Inafune, in contrast, had backward design for Mega Man 9 and 10, like removing the slide, for example, I get the idea something similar might have happened with similar circumstances.
Okay, the deal is that Mega Man 9 and 10 were intentionally being throwbacks back to Mega Man 2, so I didn't like it, but I got why they did it since they were intentionally going back to that. Like, what I'm talking about for Sonic 1 would be like, if it were a remake that's, supposed to do what remakes these days are meant to do, video game-wise. Refine, better the games, essentially, so that they make for better playing experiences altogether.
Alright, so if you recall, at this point in the original game, we, like I said, we were going to get the gadget about controlling the ship. Instead, while the ultimate goal is to get the jetpack, here we're about to get instead the grind boots after these two corridors. If you recall, the grind boots instead were obtained in the original game in the Blargs space station. So before this, as I mentioned. So instead they bother to have it here so that this level will last a bit long and ultimately use the jetpack as a reward for afterward. So they still let you do the stuff that you did in the original game, but with a different kind of reward as a, stepping stone for it.
When I first played this game, I did feel that this level felt a bit padded. Like, nothing ultra terrible, but I do feel like this might be the part of the game where some things were starting to clash, aside from what we've mentioned about, the game clashing with movie elements. No, this is one of those levels where I do feel like it felt a bit more padded than others.
Well, it's not apparent yet because, like I said, we are just doing what we did also in the original game. The path is still identical. It's not elongated. There are no extra enemies. It's almost one-to-one. Like I said, Insomniac understood the assignment that in order to having just to stick to the plot of a movie, they might as well, redo the entire original game with a higher fidelity to that. And honestly, I did not mind. And again, I can't believe it was Shaw Lady's idea because it's almost the same identical thought process that happened with the Medieval remake. The only difference is being that since that was not tied to any adaptation time around, the devs of that were allowed to just, remake the game one-to-one without, anything to be altered. Just a bit of an addition in form of a compendium and some narration from Lightning in Hell.
That's actually a good time for me to ask it and whatnot. One thing I remember that had a lot of people terrified about the, second remake of Medieval was that I recall that very first trailer involved narration from the genie, who only showed up in the very, very controversial one. Like, did we ever figure out why they did that? Since he doesn't show up in the actual project.
It's never declared immediately. If you don't remember, the first teaser also had a small screenshot of a zombie lurching to the earth. That's from the initial FMV of Resurrection as well. So everyone's tinfoil hat moment was that. Originally, that was supposed to be just a simple, upscaled, better-running version of Resurrection, which would have parsed with the fact that a lot of PSP games had not properly been re-released, and Shawn Layden was all about trying to push a bit more for, previous games, but because Jimbo was about to actually get over on the throne, and possibly Shuei Yoshida might have contributed to some factor to it. That's why the game took a longer development to be made, because instead it became a full-on remake of the first game. It's also worth noting that the developers, Other Ocean, were not particularly specialized into doing that. At best, they were doing Yu-Gi-Oh! Games up until that point, if I recall correctly.
Way to go from a literal card game video game to a platformer.
I was thought Quark was going to be like, whatever. If you delay going on the rail, I thought Quark would be like, and then Ratchet stepped on the rail.
The thing is that the Medieval Resurrection turned out pretty well, and it also includes as an unlockable the original game inside itself, so you're not even bound to buy the original if you want to play the original, so you want to stick to that. So there's also pretty neat.
I'll admit, I never hated the first remake of Medieval. I actually kind of liked the more comedic tone they threw on it. Mind you, I do get why that ultimately did not work.
It's a bit dickish the fact that they did not involve the original, creators outside of the composers, and kept very quiet about it, up until release.
Oh yeah. Like, let me make it clear. Ultimately, I do feel like the second remake is the definitive way to do it. It's just, I'll admit, I do like the ideas they had with that first remake. That said, I do wonder if when we eventually cover Medieval, if we're gonna basically cover, like, all three, since I feel like the original, the first remake, and the second remake are kind of each their own thing enough.
There's more than one remake?
Yeah, okay, to be fair, please might not know. Again, the first remake glimpse was on the PSP, which was called Resurrection, and it was arguably more of a reimagining of the first game than this is into the original Ratchet and Clank, argue. Because while the plot is roughly the same, going from point A to point B in order to stop the evil wizard, from taking over Gallowmere. The sequence of events is kind of rearranged. You meet characters in a different order. They have different things to say and different quests for you to do. So
they got Tom Baker as the narrator and the Grim Reaper.
I know who you are. You're the Lombax and the Warbat from the news.
Oh,
And you must be the
This is the new portion added to this planet, the free-roaming part for hunting. In this case, this Blarg scientist wants brains. Yes, apparently
Okay,
on this planet, brains grow just in pods.
I guess I'll give him credit. It's a way to add in a farming section, which had pretty much become a thing ever since Ratchet and Clank 2.
It also helps with giving you a potential proving ground for your jetpack, because that's your first reward, the first reward you're gonna get.
That said, we're the heroes, but we are now officially harvesting organs like the bad guys for, well, almost any British old London timer, which basically involves a mad scientist who needs body parts gotten in less legal circumstances.
Oh, don't worry, these are specific brains that I guess do not hurt anyone outside of the species where they go extinct. And to be fair, this is no stranger to how the franchise has flip-flopped into doing mean things for the purpose of money. So, this is nothing new, really. Okay.
I bring this up though because Ratchet in this game is supposed to be a goody two-shoes who
Again,
would never do something underhanded.
Insomniac clearly tried to railroad the very bland story of the movie into something more cohesive, even if it's not super noticeable, which I do, appreciate to an extent. Anyway, for now we just need to collect the 10 brains for the initial unlock. I think it's already the jetpack, but again, to go back to that, Dweebs, again, Resurrection on the PSP, we got Tom Baker, yes, for Summer Road. The problem, I argue, is that the people who handled the PSP version, mistook the franchise into being just comedic instead of having a Tim Burton kind of vibe, where yes, there was comedy, but at the same time it was still supposed to be, a bit dreary and with a bit of seriousness, while instead Resurrection basically doesn't stop into making jokes every 5 minutes when you get down to it.
If I recall correctly, they also do that thing where characters who originally didn't talk in the original now talk a whole ton in Resurrection.
Like the Pumpkin Witch, yes, for example.
Pumpkin Witch.
It's not helped by the fact that they restated one of the dummied out things that the original wanted to have. The original wanted to have Sir Daniel have a war companion that will chime in potentially and give you, I think, enemy description. In the final product, it only shows up in one single FMV. It's called Mort. Resurrection tried to update that with the idea of a story reason for that. But instead, when Sir Dan was struck by the arrow inside his eye, he was also cursed to have a spirit that will haunt his corpse, and as a result, in the actual game, will guide him in order to break said curse and be free. Unfortunately, they thought the funniest thing ever would have been to make this a genie, a Persian type of folklore genie called Al-Salam, with a very, very bad ethnic accent, which almost straight out of the Simpsons, early season of the Simpsons.
And as is customary of most genie stories of the time, of course he's someone who has to earn his true powers back for element specifics I can't.
But by the end of the game, even if he gets free, he's super buddy with Sir Dan anyway. It's not like he starts hostile to it, but it's one of those clear-cut stories that starts in one way and you know exactly how it's gonna go.
A deal's a deal. Here you go.
Here's the jetpack.
I actually have a top secret Trek Industries info pack.
So yeah, your second reward when you need to get, and there is an excuse to test the jetpack, is an info box.
Yes, I do.
I also took command Richard Steven Orwitz because I did not recognize him immediately, but so he is putting a bit of an impression for the character.
Again, like, often when you hear him, you can recognize him because he's often using stuff like the Billy or Invader Zim voice, but in stuff like Psychonauts, he does show off his range, especially when he... Okay, it's usually when he plays characters that are, more normal, shall we say, essentially, like, well, the non-wacky ones, essentially.
So basically, Dweebs, main point of contention to me with Medieval Resurrection was that it tried clearly to go into a specific direction that I did not agree with. The one thing that everyone agrees instead, works for that is, well, the score. It's not entirely made of remixes from the original, but the new stuff that they come up with, because they're the same composers from the original, it's pretty good. So as a result, a lot of the tracks from that migrated to the PS4 version.
So yeah, I'll definitely say Resurrection deserves its own commentary. The reason I wonder about the original and the second remake is that
they're
I feel like
basically the same
remake...
identical. They even use the same voice clips. They did not re-record anything. They just had Lani Minella do some narration for stuff, but that's it. Oh yeah, true. They did call back Sir Dan to do the whole all over again, but that doesn't particularly count.
I'll admit, I must have forgotten the original, because I could have sworn there was, way less talking, whereas I honestly thought that the second remake was combining aspects of the original and Resurrection, but if
it's very noticeable because they apply the same thought process to all the non-English speaking languages, including mine, and it's noticeable because being a PS1 game, the original that it was, its Italian dub was, on the same par of quality with those Pyro and Crash games of dubs that I told you in the past, so...
I literally forgot that the villain speaks in the original, honestly.
Oh yeah, again, that's one of the part of the charm, the fact that the villain's VA, RIP, really likes to do the whole, really enjoys the role that he was given.
Yeah. If I recall correctly, they did have plans to do a sequel to Resurrection, but I forget why they canned those.
No idea. Medieval as a franchise is just cursed because, again, third game never happened, then, the Resurrection happened, and then nothing, then the PS4 remake, then nothing. The best that happened is the fact that both the original and 2 are now properly available as a part of the backward compatibility program on PS4. But the problem is that...
Add to the curse.
But the problem is that, they won't make the franchise continue to an extent, because, it's more important to have photorealism and stories about single parents having to deal with trauma or something, I don't know.
I'd say we're in an era where Sony are willing to do cartoony stuff again, but it always feels like there's a catch.
They just announced at the Game Awards, their new hero shooter clone.
Well, this is why I say it feels like while they're more willing to do cartoony stuff, it feels like there's a catch always.
Outside of Astrobot, I guess Marvel Tocon to an extent, but that really felt more bizarre to me than anything. I don't know whose idea Sony was to greenlight that, because it really stands out compared to the entire barrage that let me just cut that, Jimbo and the other guy, I forgot, the guy from Guerrilla.
Yoshida?
No.
Guerrilla Games.
Guerrilla Games, forgot his name, whatever. Basically, the people in charge actually wanted,
Speaking of Medieval being cursed, bit tertiary, but also gotta point out, they did my boy Sir Dan so dirty in PlayStation All-Stars.
Actually, he's one of the characters I actually like the most. Honestly, the characters that are the least fun to play to me would be Fat Princess, Sackboy went through a fuck ton of different nerfs and buffs, so I cannot really speak for that. A bit, I forgot his name, the guy from Starhawk, because his entire gameplay mechanic is to be a zoner, but for the agility that the game has, it doesn't really work, if you ask me.
Oh man, my experiences playing with Sir Dan were never good. Did they buff him at some point to make him better, or?
I guess also Colonel Mal Radek.
Playing by that point.
I guess also Colonel Mal Radek might be a bit, clunky to play. Basically, almost all ranged characters in PlayStation Star Battle Royale are a bit difficult to handle, if you ask me. While in contrast, the close-range characters like Kratos, Big Daddy, and especially Raiden, are relatively, easy to access for all characters, for all players. Sorry.
Bringing things back to Ratchet and cartoony stuff, I mean, hey, we're bound to get a new Ratchet Clank in game sometime this century.
I don't know. Again, I will believe it when I see it. Just because we know in advance thanks to the data theft, that doesn't mean it's gonna actually happen.
Okay, I will say this. If it takes a while, I have to believe it's mainly because A, it's taking a while to develop, and B, they're just putting it on hold rather than they've canned it out of nowhere, because last I checked, Rift Apart did still sell
Not to mention, well, again, it's worth noting that remembering, compared to stuff that we know, from the things mentioned in the data theft, things did change. Again, Spider-Man 2 had its entire DLC lineup cancelled, and the multiplayer game was scrapped. So it was clear that Insomniac was focusing entirely on Wolverine instead, which we'll have to see how that turns out, because the stuff that was leaked about that were not super reassuring, if you ask me. Probably still a fun game to play, but we will see.
I wonder if Sony are kind of in panic mode, because nowadays, because of how expensive gaming is, now a game has to sell like a gajillion units to so much to sell even, let alone profit. So I do wonder if, like, whatever's going on with Wolverine has Sony panicking, and that's why it's all hands on deck with that game for Insomniac.
Well, budget your games properly then. Where did all that money go to? Did they go to the, I don't know, to make sure that the code for lighting Wolverine's tip of his claw was shiny enough?
You joke, but there are legit some devs who really gush over details like that, and don't get me wrong, it's nice when you can achieve that detail, but I don't think it should come
Remember,
at the
you could, in Final Fantasy
price
13, if you zoom in enough, you could see Lightning's navel piercing. How important is that? I don't know, and honestly I don't even mind it as a character trait, but honestly I don't really need this uber graphical fidelity to see that. If it's in the character artwork, good for everyone, but I don't need the game to be that taxing as a result. Anyway, let's collect the
I do wonder...
The Telepathopus army is as good as mine. Sorry for what? Remember, you didn't get it from me.
Good evening, fellow Blarg. Chairman Trek here with the latest update on our quest for a new home. Over the next few days, you may notice an increase in Blarg activity around the galaxy. While this may alert the authorities to our plan, this move is critical to securing safe passage for our harvesters. Case in point, the Star Watch defense cannon on planet Batalia. This surface-to-space ion cannon has been...
This is this is your segue to go to Batalia. Honestly, one of the words that made more sense to keep, from the original, considering the plot of the original is reimagined more as a full-out war with the Blargs for this game. It's just that instead of actually having to deal with the local soldiers to help them, like in the original game, you're instead just helping the Galactic Rangers to defeat the robots.
Makes sense. Oh yeah, if I recall correctly, movie-wise, this is gonna be around the time where Quark finally betrays us.
Yeah, that will happen off-screen, mind you, by the way, because we don't get to see the... I don't think we get to see the scene where he gets corrupted, but I think the implication, Jova, was that they tried to stick to the plot of the original game and say that he was always corrupt from the get-go.
That's kind of a bit of something that runs aground of... Okay, specifically of the clips we've seen from the movie in this game, I feel like that still kind of clashes. And mind you, I do feel that that's more in the movie than it is the game, essentially, but if that's the plot they're trying to work with, I don't know. I feel like they should have added it in, like, at least a cutscene, which, keep in mind also, I believe they still show the cutscene, you know, implying that, you know, Quark's getting contacted with the offer to go corrupt as opposed to,
You'll
you know,
see.
he was always working for him.
For now, the plot-wise, we're before we strike the production facility, you know, so we'll need to get there first. For now, let's get all the brains to this guy and get our
Looks like you
reward.
got 'em all. And now to create my army.
I like how because it's using the in-game map for these cutscenes, the collectibles were still swirling around him when the cutscene started.
Sandwich right out of the fridge.
Ha! Imagining someone being petty enough to steal food from the company's fridge. Glad that will never happen in the real world.
Enjoy your reward.
Let alone with breast milk.
I designed a useful little gadget for you. Slam down your wrench and the box breaker will destroy boxes.
There you go.
all around.
Yeah, your final reward is the box breaker for collecting all the brains, which honestly it's always appreciated for this kind of thing. You will still use the jetpack later on, so don't worry, this is not a one-time deal kind of thing. It's just that it's not as prevalent as you might think, considering the level design still has to accommodate the original game to an extent.
Which is a bit of a shame because they made the jetpack so much fun in this game, essentially. You know, I mean, okay, it arguably captures the ability of you being able to fly, but it balances that out by making it so that you
It's still
can't
the
fly
same as Into
forever
the
with it,
Nexus,
essentially.
you know, so you know
Yeah.
everything already from that game. Anyway, in the next part, as we're about to see, we're gonna go from Gaspar, there you go, that's the name of the planet, to instead Battaglia, like in the original. Thankfully this time around, because of story reason, we won't have to spend any amount of time with Ratchet being PC and Clank wanting to actually get the duo back to the plot. So see you for that.
See ya.
Yeah.